we will start with Fordham. We will next go to Penn State. We will then go to Catholic University. And then we will go to the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
I apologize to interrupt. What were the group members for Penn State one more time?
I've got Catherine Onaka. No, I didn't pronounce that right. Would you correct me? What is this? What?
It's Annika.
Annika.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Annika. And I've got really bad handwriting, and I have AN, and then there's no way I can tell what the rest of it is. Please.
It's Anna is our last group member.
Boy, I can see that it's Anna now. It's just that after the N, the other N and the A flattened out. I should have been a doctor. I would have been so effective giving prescriptions, right? No one would read them. All right. So Fordham, is your consulting firm ready?
Yes, we are ready.
When you start talking, I'm going to hit start.
I just ask real quick that the member is that everybody?
That is the three that are
good to go.
The consultants. Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, we're ready.
Start and I'll hit.
Okay. Thank you so much for welcoming our consulting team, RAM Consulting, to further discuss and explain the ethical implications of the problem with Robinhood and potential solutions that can grow your company's operations and develop confidence and trust within your user base. Let me begin this meeting by stating an important date, June 12th, 2020, a date very vivid to your company. 20-year-old Alexander Kearns took his life last June after noticing he supposedly lost $750,000 on a risky bet using Robinhood. An article by CBS stated that Robinhood had granted Alex approval to trade options even though he had a limited exposure with trading. Alex tried reaching out to your company by sending out emails but received none in response. But why does this matter? Alex took his life without knowing the number of risks involved with trading. Despite your company's mission statement being to democratize finance for all, you have failed to provide the proper information of the necessary risks and strategies involved with trading for a participant of this democracy. As the accessibility of the stock market rises with just a few taps on a smartphone, it becomes even more important to provide information within trading platforms like Robinhood.
So to recap our last meeting, the main legal issues you are facing are gamification lawsuits and the SEC filing. And the financial implications of the problem highlight the weak financial standing of your company and emphasize its unprepared ability to handle volatility. Finally, your company is faced with an ethical dilemma. Is Robinhood acting responsibly by allowing new traders to expose themselves to high levels of financial risk?
With this question in mind, let's now discuss some of the guiding ethical principles that will contribute to your company's success. One of these principles is fairness. Fairness is very important to keep in mind as it will allow you to balance the user's best interest and Robinhood's mission of accessibility. On one end, your goal is to democratize finance, which implies encouraging a high volume of users to join the platform and start trading. But on the other hand, as more inexperienced users engage themselves within the application and expose themselves to financial risks, the balance between these 2 points begins to shift. We would argue that Robinhood is currently favoring democracy over the best interest of the user. And even though you may not be legally obligated to warn and educate users on investment risks or provide them with educational tools regarding trading basics, providing these tools could be a fair solution to better balance the customer's best interests with the accessibility.
Transparency also plays a critical role as an ethical principle in the dilemma. This is mainly seen in how Robinhood presents information to its users and how it affects the relationship between the firm and the customer base. This is where the application's design comes into play. Gamification has a heavy influence on users' decision and behavior. Encouraging and enticing customers to place uninformed trades on the application is a threat to user autonomy. Transparency is essential to the success of your company as it is the foundation of building a trusting relationship between your company and your users.
So the decisions surrounding the ethical problem and various principles above all have an effect on the welfare of users and concern for others. You aim to be more accessible, approachable, and understandable. Therefore, it is crucial that Robinhood avoids imposing a risk of the harm on users. Your company should consider concern for others, especially when using certain business tactics, as the consequences of making uninformed investment decisions can be very serious. The potential harm to investors is the loss of hundreds and thousands of dollars, but also even the loss of life, as demonstrated by Alexander Kearns' tragic death. Robinhood failing to operate ethically may negatively affect your customers' perception of the company and lead to a loss in users and increased scrutiny from the general public.
Taking into consideration all of these ethical principles, we've determined that an ethical solution will overall have three main characteristics: fairness, transparency, and autonomy. A fair solution is one that balances the user's well-being and interests while still maintaining the accessibility to achieve your goal and democratize finance for all. Next, a transparent solution will increase user awareness regarding business practices and strategies. And finally, autonomy means that our solution will allow the users to make informed decisions without other factors such as gamification that influence decision-making capabilities. And to recap our last meeting, we proposed 4 solutions that will help restore this trusting relationship between Robinhood and your user base and create a fair balance between the mission statement and the consumer's best interest, as well as reducing gamification to restore autonomy. Taking into consideration the best interest of Robinhood's users, we believe that providing in-app educational tools is very important for your company. Informing users on risk will improve user welfare by making them more prepared to make financial decisions. Additionally, prioritizing welfare of users will establish a more trusting relationship and a positive reputation, which will ultimately lead to longer-term use of the app.
Additionally, it's important for your company to rethink its current app design in order to prioritize user autonomy. By decreasing the gamification, the platform will become more transparent and allow users to make informed decisions without being influenced by the game-like design. This is an ethically effective solution as it's avoiding diminishing the risks associated with trading. Redesigning aspects of the application will create a more appropriate balance between your users' best interests and Robinhood's mission. In addition to rethinking the general design of the application, we propose that you repurpose the current Robinhood rewards program, which grants users free stocks. By changing the current referral-based model to a more education-based model, the well-being and autonomy of users can be balanced. Incentivizing users to complete educational modules to earn a free stock will properly inform users on investing basics and risks and ultimately leading to an increased autonomy.
Furthermore, the insufficiency of your current customer service support system being only an unresponsive email prohibits users from receiving time-sensitive information. The frequent technical difficulties with the application, along with a lack of responsiveness towards personal investment decisions and concerns, have created an unfair situation for many of your users. This leaves many confused, overwhelmed, and frustrated, as many of these concerns are out of their control. But by developing a stronger, responsive, and interactive customer service support system, you will be able to uphold the ethical principles of both fairness and transparency. Not only will these solutions make your company more ethical, but they will also provide a sustainable competitive advantage, as many of your competitors, such as TD and Ameritrade, have already begun to implement similar solutions in order to operate more ethically. Establishing trust between the Robinhood brand and your users is the key to longevity of your company. The solutions we just explained will provide tangible benefits to both your company and your users. As a company, Robinhood can establish a positive relationship with its users that can directly grow the user daily rate. And the solution will further build a user-friendly reputation for your brand that can serve as a competitive advantage in the future. As for the customers, the tangible benefits are the greater accessibility to educational tools that will allow them to make more informed decisions on their own. This will in turn increase their individual financial freedom. And so let's keep in mind that many of the financial and legal interests of your company also align with the ethical principles that we have mentioned. Integrating solutions that prioritize fairness, transparency, welfare, and autonomy will ensure the long-term success of Robinhood and the user base. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I would now like 2 minutes, and so you all can breathe deeply or whatever. But thank you very much, Fordham. And I'll take my 2 minutes, and we'll do the next one. Thank you. Thank you three very much. All right, so I am the CEO. Good to know. All right, when you're ready, just let me know.
Yep, I think we're ready to start.
When you start, I'll hit.
Okay. Thank you, Google, for bringing us on as consultants to take a second look at our proposal today. We understand, excuse me, we understand how much you value ethics to bring us back for a second discussion. So we'd like to talk to you more about how you can live out your values by developing this community. Again, my name is Annika Cernak, and these are my colleagues, Catherine Groves and Anna Shemek. And today we are going to bring back this topic of your proposed community, which you are calling Middlefield Park. And this is in the East Weisman neighborhood in the larger city of Mountain View, California, your headquarters area. And again, this is a mixed use community of houses and offices, green space, retail space. And ultimately you are building this community because you are committed to helping this housing crisis in the Bay Area. And we've already seen that this is legal and financially viable, but we'd like to dive deeper into the ethics concerning this corporate neighborhood. We want to do this the right way so this is a one long-term solution that creates value for all of your stakeholders. And we also want to acknowledge that the general public might think of past corporate towns in the 1880s to 1930s and might associate this negatively, but we want to get ahead of that and address that most of these ethical issues simply aren't relevant anymore today, but there are new ethical issues due to this increase in interconnectedness. So there's so much that we could analyze ethically, but today we want to focus on virtue ethics and who you are and how our solutions align with your values. So let's go over some of your guiding principles. First, we have fairness and consistency. And this ensures that individuals are treated fairly, respectfully, and compassionately. And next we have commitment. So you make sure to set a tone at the top of commitment to a safe, respectful, and inclusive working environment. And we also have care. And you want to create an environment with an emphasis on respect, which we see as a common theme throughout your guiding principles, and also show empathy to employees and also members of the extended workforce. And lastly, you have a guiding principle of transparency, and you set a goal to be open and transparent to all of your stakeholders. So now that we have outlined these guiding principles as a framework, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague Anna to recommend specific solutions that align with these principles.
Thank you, Annika. So as Annika mentioned, there are a lot of ethical considerations that go into the development of this neighborhood. And while we don't have time to touch on them all, we do want to focus on what we believe is most foundational, which is aligning your guiding principles throughout this process. So for our solution, it has 4 pieces, and each of those 4 pieces aligns with one of your guiding principles. The idea of ensuring that this neighborhood is not company exclusive aligns with fairness and consistency. Avoiding building luxury homes and instead implementing a modular building design aligns with the idea of commitment. Paying impact fees upfront or in a more condensed timeline aligns with care. And finally, communicating openly with all of your stakeholders aligns with the idea of transparency. You say that you want to live by these values in order to conduct business to the highest possible ethical standard, and we believe that our solution is a good first step for that. as the world and the tech industry continue to develop and change, there's going to be issues that we didn't foresee. They're going to be new, they're going to be developing. And while we can't address those all immediately at the conception of an idea, what we can do is we can prepare. And we believe that by building this strong ethical groundwork, we can help set Google up to be better prepared for ethical issues that might develop in the future, if and when they happen due to these new changes. So another thing that we believe needs to be taken into consideration in addition to the guiding principles is the concept of justice as fairness. And we need to do this because we're looking at creating social institutions in this specific project. And so we believe that our solution, again, takes into consideration this concept throughout all pieces of the solution, the four-part solution. And we believe that this becomes especially prevalent, this concept of justice, when we look at the housing crisis in the Bay Area, which in 2019, you committed $1 billion to helping solve. The idea of justice underlies each piece of our solution in that justice is supposed to distribute social benefits, in this case housing, equally to all members of society, unless an unequal distribution is beneficial to all and benefits the least advantaged members of society. When we look at this housing crisis, those affected by it are the least advantaged. And so we want our solution to help address that. So when we look at both of these concepts, we believe that Google has a wonderful opportunity to be a trendsetter in this industry. We want Google to be the blueprint for new neighborhoods. And if other companies choose to follow suit, we want them to have a strong prototype to follow in order to make these corporate neighborhoods successful. If we don't, we'll start to see issues of past corporate towns begin to crop up again. And original corporate towns failed because they did not consider ethical considerations both at the beginning and through the conception, development, and creation of their corporate towns. So we believe, Google, that if you use our solution, you can align your innovative ideas with both your guiding principles as well as the concept of justice and set both yourself and others up for success both now and in the future.
You brought us back here today to discuss this neighborhood in East Weissman because Google, you recognized the potential ethical risks of a neighborhood and wanted to make sure that you were taking the due diligence to create this town the right way. We needed to make sure that your town wasn't going to be confused with corporate towns of the past where employees had no privacy, employees had no voice, and companies tried to control everything from their internal employees to the larger communities beyond. While this neighborhood that we're looking at that you're proposing is vastly different from corporate towns of the past, there's still a lot that we can learn from them. We can make sure that we're not making those same mistakes again and that we're creating this neighborhood the right way that benefits everyone. Our four-pronged solution makes sure that this neighborhood is built in a way that is responsive to the housing crisis and is also in alignment with Google's principles: care, commitment, transparency, fairness, consistency, and accountability. These are more than just words to you. They're your guiding principles. And like everything else should be in your business, our proposed solution aligns with these. It's important that Google's not just making claims about what's important to you, but that you're actually evaluating every single decision by these concepts, that you're living every day guided by these principles like you say you are. We've set you up now with this plan, and if you follow our proposed plan for your neighborhood, you can be ethical now, but we want to call out that the conversations aren't done there. There's more work that will be done. We need to have continued conversations as this town is put into place about possible ethical issues that may arise. There may be caste systems between employees who live in the town versus those who live out of the town. We need to make sure that Google is taking into consideration, how do we fairly allocate housing units to both your employees and residents of the town outside of Google? And finally, we need to make sure that Google is able to integrate this mixed income community in a way that respects all persons and treats them with the dignity that they deserve. These are important issues. We're not denying that, and they do need to be discussed, but not today. Today, we need to focus on the issues that Annika and Anna discussed because they're our foundation. We need to make sure that we're focusing on the town first and how it's developed to make sure we build something strong and lay the groundwork for Google in the future to address any other ethical issues that may arise. When you start having those other conversations once the town is developed, we would love, again, when that time comes, to help you best navigate these challenges and make sure that, as always, Google's actions are in alignment with your guiding principles. Because if you can do that, you can be successful into the future. Thank you again for your time and letting us discuss these important ethical considerations.
Thank you very much. Terrific. Both teams have managed to just do this before the bell rings. That shows a lot of practice, and that's great. I'm going to take my 2 minutes. All right. Thank you. All right, so it's Jonathan and William. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Absolutely. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm a freshman at the Catholic University of America, and I am speaking to you from Washington, D.C.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm from Potomac, Maryland. I'm a freshman at Catholic University, and I'm currently a business management major.
I will reset to 10 minutes and invite you to start whenever you start talking.
Okay. Thank you for bringing us back from the Board of Directors. We are the private consulting firm that you hired to discuss the potential ramifications of the opioid crisis that occurred in 2007. While we wish we could be in person, this should hopefully be a suitable alternative. If you remember from last time, we discussed that the opioid crisis could be traced back to how Purdue Pharma marketed OxyContin. That was both in a dishonest manner to physicians, but also in their withholding of information from the government when information about abuse rates became known to the company. Although we mentioned these events prior, we're going to today delve into the underlying ethical issues to discuss why the company's solutions of reformulation and transparency are the optimal, most ethical decision that you could make today.
When it comes to the ethical decision that we presented in our last presentation, it came down to that of the greater good and the common good. You might be thinking, what is the difference? Well, the difference is hundreds of thousands of lives saved. It is the difference between saving lives and being complicit in the loss of lives. When it comes to the corporate values of Purdue, they are already following that of the common good, but they have gone astray in creating the drug known as OxyContin. When creating this drug, they went instead for an approach of the greater good, and saying that since most benefit, it is okay that it can be easily abused. They said that those that can be prone to addiction or already abusing the drug do not matter. They're saying that their lives can be lost in the hundreds of thousands. It is why Purdue must return to its original values, which are already those of the common good, those of courage, innovation, integrity, and collaboration, to ensure that in an industry of medicine where life and death is always at play, that of the common good is picked so all lives may be protected and all may benefit.
Moving into the second ethical issue, in addition to what my colleague John mentioned, there is an advertising campaign that was specifically designed for manipulation and exploitation, because there's another factor at here, the physician. On paper, Purdue Pharma's advertising campaign was one of the most brilliant ever conceived. The federal government did put physicians in a position that was difficult. On the one hand, they had to prescribe pain management drugs. But number two, if they prescribed too many, or just a few people abused the drugs that they were prescribing, physicians would oftentimes be thrown under the bus. So when OxyContin came out with a 12-hour lifespan, compared to other products which only had a 3 to 4 hour lifespan, it was a boon for physicians who could suddenly prescribe less and have the government intervene less. So though the 19 times as much that Purdue Pharma spent on marketing compared to research and development is an ethical issue in and of itself, the advertising campaign on paper was beneficial, or at least was effective. But the problem wasn't that Purdue Pharma advertised, it's how they advertised. You see, Purdue Pharma's OxyContin had a massive risk of abuse. If crushed, dissolved, or snorted, 68% of its contents would be released at any given time. And this information was not communicated with physicians. Additionally, when Purdue Pharma decided to advertise, they didn't advertise to all physicians. They engaged in selective cherry picking. To give you some examples, they had the database where they located physicians with a large client base. They looked for physicians who are more likely to overprescribe drugs. They specifically avoided states that had built-in drug tracking programs. And there were some physicians who were on the line, specifically those with massive clientele. But Purdue Pharma paid for vacations, excursions, amongst other things, to persuade those physicians to prescribe the drug. So again, it wasn't that Purdue Pharma was wrong in advertising, it's how they advertised. Physicians were inexperienced with pain management, and yet they were fed dishonest information by the company. Yesterday, Purdue Pharma's board of directors mentioned that they might not be responsible for the actions taken by individual abusers and their abuse of the drug. And we would say that that thinking is correct. Purdue Pharma cannot be held responsible for individual actions, but they can be held responsible for making those individual actions possible, specifically by being dishonest towards physicians. And the third and final ethical issue at play is a matter of knowledge versus negligence. Another potential complication brought up by Purdue Pharma's board of directors was that the government also had some degree of liability. The FDA was there when Purdue Pharma's OxyContin failed the abuse deterrent program. In other words, seeing whether it was prone to abuse or not. And yet the FDA still allowed the marketing of the drug. But there was something underlying it that we don't believe that Purdue Pharma understood, and that was collaboration. Even if imperfect, Purdue Pharma was collaborating with the government to bring what they believed was a beneficial product to the market. And the FDA chief acting officer at the time noted that he did not believe that abuse would likely occur under OxyContin. But that was collaboration, and Purdue Pharma has strayed away from this. Since that moment, Purdue Pharma developed a drug tracking system, radars, that was leagues above the government's drug tracking programs. The government's drug tracking programs cannot account for rural, marginalized, impoverished, and uneducated communities where a majority of the abuse was occurring. But Purdue Pharma's radar's drug tracking system knew exactly where the abuse was occurring. But rather than notifying the government and potentially starving off an opioid crisis, Purdue Pharma has withheld this information from the government. And so its company values of integrity and courage have fallen by the wayside, and instead secrecy has come into play. And this is an unacceptable outcome because now the government wants information. It is willing to investigate you because the knowledge that they presume that they were going to get is no longer coming. Think about it from a legal perspective. Your culpability and responsibility rises the more knowledge you have. And although the government was negligent for allowing a product prone to abuse to be put on the market, Purdue Pharma has a greater responsibility because they knew exactly when, where, and how the abuse was occurring, yet they failed to notify the government, which means that you, as of right now, possess a greater ethical responsibility, and also meaning that our company's solutions that we are providing to you of reformulation and transparency are the most optimal and the most ethical decision you could make.
As I stated before, when it comes to the industry of medicine, the common good is the one that must be taken. No physician will ever pick that of the greater good in choosing to spare some lives and let others not. This means that choosing the common good must also fall upon Purdue, which is already what they've said they have followed in their company values. And saying that we will practice true innovation through reformulation, which Purdue has already shown they have the technology to do. Meaning that we allow for a drug to be created in which 68% of the substances are not released when it's crushed. Meaning that a drug that can be just as effective as the current product of OxyContin can be created, so that those who are prone to abuse or are currently abusing will not have the same risk and can benefit from the same amazing innovation that Purdue Pharmaceuticals can provide in terms of payment. in terms of integrity and following that they make sure they do what is right and having the courage to take a small decrease in demand for a later increase in profit. It is through reformulation that Purdue Pharmaceuticals can return to its original corporate values that it has strayed from. And it's through this reformulation that a safe drug that can benefit all can return to market.
And as my colleague John mentioned, there is another company value, and that's called collaboration. But collaboration can only exist when knowledge is imparted to both sides. I'm sure you board of directors have worked on many company projects. What if there were 3 of you and 2 of you did not know the instructions? Would that company project be successful? It would not. The same thing is occurring now with the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma has knowledge that the government does not. And the reason the government is willing to intervene is because they do not have the knowledge needed to stop the opioid crisis, and they believe that you are directly responsible, even if the government itself had some degree of liability, which means that transparency is the optimum route for you to go. By imparting knowledge to the government, you can work in collaboration to prevent the opioid crisis or to mitigate its effects. For abusers who are moving on to different drugs, you will be able to track them and either bring them to retribution or bring them to rehabilitation. But this also has another effect. It preserves your future profit. It preserves your reputation. It preserves your image. And this all fits within the realm of your company values. Your company values support the common good, but the greater good mentality that you've been taking has threatened to destroy your company. And unless immediate action is taken, your company will go bankrupt. And that is why we believe that our company solutions are not just ethical, but the most optimal that you can take. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Yet again, you guys all timed this really beautifully. That's a coup in and of itself. When you do have a chance to make presentations in the companies that you'll be hired by, or if you become consultants, it's funny how important it is for people to stay within the time limit that a company says, I'll give you a half an hour, or I'll give you 45 minutes. In this case, we're only giving you 10 minutes. So good job again. Thank you very much. I want my 2 minutes. It would be great to have you all identify yourselves and share who you are. Whenever you want to start.
We're the University of Wisconsin Madison team. I'm Aiden Godfrey. I'm a sophomore major in computer science, and I'm living in Madison, Wisconsin right now.
I'm Maya. I'm a sophomore at UW studying philosophy, and I'm in Madison right now.
I'm Noor. I'm a freshman majoring in finance, and I'm also coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. When you're ready, let me know, and I will start my 10 minutes, as I'm sure you will too.
Good morning. We are Badger Consulting, and we would like to thank the board for inviting us back to discuss the ethical dimensions of Apple's recycling methods. Yesterday, we applauded Apple for their continuous efforts and commitment to fulfilling their core values. More specifically, we highlighted Apple's success in fulfilling their ambition to make products without taking from the earth, as stated in their environmental responsibility report. Apple has shown dedication to help saving our planet by releasing environmental reports on their most latest products, such as the iPhone 12, the first smartphone with 100% recycled rare earth elements in all magnets. As proposed yesterday, Badger Consulting encourages Apple to further their environmental initiatives by stepping away from third-party recycling manufacturers that make Apple indirectly responsible for ethical harms such as child labor with abysmal wages of $1.50 a day, and the growth of chemicals in the groundwaters which exceeds soil safety, and that results in exposing citizens of this community to abnormal levels of chemicals, ultimately leading to potential cancer risks. Additionally, yesterday, we introduced 2 key terms, e-waste, which stands for electronic waste, and closed loop, which we define as utilizing processes to maintain and recover value from their products in an effort to keep costs low and minimize waste. We recommended that Apple begins a partnership with international verifiers such as UNIDO, which stands for United Nations Industrial Development Organization, to assure that labor and environmental standards that they value are met by working towards implementing a closed-loop recycling process.
So why should Apple as a corporation care? The framework we proposed yesterday emphasizes that the purpose of a corporation is to create value for all its stakeholders. We define a stakeholder as any group that is vital to the survival and success of the corporation. Examples of stakeholders include employees, customers, shareholders, and suppliers. In the past, businesses were thought to only prioritize the interests of their shareholders, but changes in law and economic constraints show that this can no longer be the case. Legally, consumer rights, employee rights, and the rights in the interest of the local community in a way force the corporation to include them more. Economically, externalities and monopolies prevent the real cost from being reflected in the price of the product, an outcome that does not promote the greatest good. In addition, following the stakeholder framework directly benefits Apple as a whole because your shareholders are stakeholders too. The responsibility to solve the entirety of the e-waste problem in no way falls on Apple. However, we aim to show that through the reduction of harms resulting from e-waste, your company values and mission is upheld. Apple's brand is one that inspires. Notably, the Think Different campaign from 1997 aims to honor those who sought to change the world. This mindset has admirably been implemented in everything that you do. Recent environmental initiatives include your commitment to become 100% carbon neutral by 2030, as well as a closed-loop manufacturing process. Tim Cook, the CEO, stated, "Businesses have a profound opportunity to help build a more sustainable future, one born out of our common concern for the planet we share." He recognizes that business is more than shareholder value or short-term benefits. Rather, business, and especially Apple, is an influential force that drives the future. By developing closed-loop recycling processes to minimize the negative impact of e-waste, Apple would utilize the stakeholder theory to promote longevity and to act along its values.
I discussed, we believe this solution is the best course of action for Apple in the long term. Our solution plans to bolster the ethical business practices of Apple in the coming years by utilizing existing and new infrastructure for recycling while contracting out their services. This will occur all while staying ahead of future e-waste legislation. We propose that Apple partners with known international verifiers to make sure the recycling factories are keeping a stringent labor and environmental standards. UNIDO, as Noor discussed earlier, will be a perfect verifier to work with. UNIDO has already partnered with 13 countries, primarily in Latin America, to assist both technically and financially to improve old infrastructure and establish new infrastructure for recycling plants. In UNIDO's partnership, there are initiatives centered around the safe and ethical disposal of e-waste. UNIDO has the same potential to help Apple to ensure their waste is sent to recyclers where environmental and worker conditions are sufficient. In effect, Apple can be certain their e-waste is being handled responsibly, so they can be seen as a public leader in e-waste recycling. As we discussed earlier, our outline for the future consists of 3 steps after partnering with UNIDO. First, Apple can use existing factories as a base point. Most of the factories right now are in Latin America, where labor is still relatively cheap for e-waste to be recycled. The difference in price between the recyclers they have now and UNIDO-sponsored recyclers will almost be negligible. We have set out goals by 2023 that a majority of the e-waste being exported abroad will be to these sponsored facilities. Second, in conjunction with UNIDO, we hope to also expand the current infrastructure and create Apple-owned facilities. We have set out goals by 2025 for these factories to begin construction. In doing this, Apple will be able to implement better oversight over the condition of the plants and reduce the cost of buying back recycled material from these third-party vendors, because now there will be these third-party vendors. Externally, Apple will also be able to license out the recycling services to competitors and other electronic manufacturers. Since the amount of waste is on the rise, the market for recycling rises as well. The global e-waste management market is estimated at $3.6 million in 2019 and is expected to grow to $13.3 billion in 2016. If Apple were to tap into an exploding market, Apple would have an ethical and reliable alternative source of revenue. We have set out goals for that 2020, our services will be contracted out by then. Lastly, but most importantly, we hope that we can partner with Unido to create executive positions as part of the Goodwill Ambassadors Program. This program is intended to champion the execution of sustainable manufacturing and industrial development. Yet again, working in conjunction with this program, Apple can make further steps in their terms to commitment to the environment. It's also important to note that eventually a solution like this will have to be implemented. Legislation in both the United States and EU is being proposed to increase recycling rates and stop the flow of e-waste to other countries that have unethical recycling, like China. The passage of such legislation is imminent in coming years. So having to change the logistics of e-waste disposal will have to happen eventually. But doing it now will leave Apple in a better position ethically, financially, and legally when legislation is passed. We all know that Apple is a company that's centered around innovation. Tim Cook and others prided themselves on the fact that innovation is in the DNA of the company. From the Macintosh to the iPod to the iPhone, Apple products have always been revolutionary. This innovation stems from generations of great work for people at Apple that think different. As we step into a new generation of problems, Apple is presented with an opportunity with a team of great minds to think different on the responsibilities to the environment, to think different on ethical recycling, and to think different on how Apple can best impact the world. Thank you for your time, and we hope you take our recommendations into consideration.
Thank you very much. Wow, important. Thank you very much. And I wish you great luck when it comes to your 92nd. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.